Now we're getting into martial arts. I'm super nerdy tonight. That's why tethered weapons that are like rope-based, chain-based, require the most skill. Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We're here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. Cassie has about 23 years and I have about 25. So tonight we are talking about intensity in your dancing. And we're looking at a really great dance of Jordan and Tot. It's a demo from ESS.
And for those of you who watch us on YouTube and enjoy us, please spread the word because we are getting closer and closer to those magical 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours. Because if you hadn't noticed, YouTube is putting ads in front of our videos, but we don't see a lick of that revenue. So help us. Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm gonna drop the link for tonight's video in the chat. Oh, that ending.
So good.
So good. And like this cover, I love it.
I know, me too.
Excellent.
Such a good choice.
Yes.
Which can segue into
preamble time.
My first point, which is going to be the song choice is really important when you have when you're wanting to add intensity to your dancing. Like if the song doesn't match that, it's just not going to go over well. It's not going to have the effect that you want. And a lot of times it'll throw off your partner as well. Like if you're wanting to do something that's like way more intense than the song calls for. So the song choice is super important for it. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about is the difference between spotlights and social dancing. I would say that having intensity in your dancing is more for spotlighted situations, but if you are out social dancing and there's a song that, comes on that's like this, if this song comes on, the cover for Sex Back comes on, then obviously if you have a partner that has the skill to do so, you could, make it something more intense and fun if that's what you want to do, but you don't have to. But I just generally think that you're going to more or less see it more spotlighted than out socially. And the other thing to that is Jordan and Tot are really good at like intensity in their dances because they know each other really well and they have their moves that have those elements that create that intensity, just like right there ready to go. So it's something that like it's going to be harder to do with a partner that you're not as familiar with, because it does take really good connection and good partnering technique. So I think that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I think I'll add to that. One of the things that we'll be probably talking about tonight is if you're going to be intense, you have to balance that with less intensity. There still needs to be contrast within the phrasing of your dancing, because if you just go like all out 100% intense the whole time, the intensity is going to be just meaningless and overwhelming for the audience. Yeah. So having contrast and different levels of intensity is like really important. And that's why we picked this dance in particular, because they do such a beautiful job of having contrast with their intensity throughout the whole song. And it follows that kind of story structure that we talked about in one of our previous choreography analysis, where like at the 3/4 mark is when you have that prolonged intense ride. And that's like the perfect place in the length of a song to put it.
I also want to add, so a lot of times, people love Jordan and Tot for good reason. And, they want to kind of mimic their style of dance. And so we'll see like people trying to do this intensity in their dancing without really having the skill for it.
Right.
And it's a little much. It becomes hard for the partner to work with. Mm-hmm. And it's also just visually not quite as appealing. So I should say when you are doing that without the skill, because it ends up looking like you're throwing your partner around or you're throwing yourself around if you're the follow.
Right. So. And it can even, depending on how much weight support is involved, it can become dangerous, or how quickly things happen. It can be dangerous for your shoulders. So like the technique is really important.
I think that's all I had for preamble.
All right, cool. That was some juicy preamble. I like it. All right. Oh, how it might be helpful for us to just like define what we mean by intense. So why don't you take a stab at that first?
So I would say, like, when you're ramping up anything in what you're doing, so like momentum or the size of the movements that you're doing, things like that. So when you're kind of ramping that up, making it more. But I also want to say that I'll probably go into some more detail when we get into framing through.
So. Gotcha. Some other words that I might use to describe it is like clarity, but with power of intention. So, so the opposite of intensity is softness, I would think. So like any of these kinds of patterns or movements that they do could be done in a soft way that wouldn't apply to this song at all, but would apply to a different song. So basically any given movement, like intensity or softness, is not an innate quality of any movements. It's how you dance a movement that applies the intensity or softness. To the screen share. I just love how neither of them were prepared for the song at all. That just like visceral reaction Jordan has is just excellent.
Reminds me of at Ask Jam, I think it was the All-Star Jack and Jill Spotlight Finals, where the first song came on. It was like really loud. Like everyone.
Oh yeah, the entire room cringed in unison, and it looked a little bit like everyone seated for the spotlights were just like blown over from the subwoofer. It was fantastic.
And Kyrie was super dramatic about it, obviously.
Yeah.
Really knocked it.
On brand.
So we start out normal. And that's really what we should be doing, because it's the start of the song, and even songs that are more intense have to build to it. I will say that generally you can feel a little bit more intensity initially in a strong beat, but generally it still has to build up to being really intense in terms of the song. So I really like this choice by Todd to just kind of, just take a strong stance and then do a little extra with it. And that's one thing that you can do to really emphasize and up the intensity, is to just like power pose it, like have really strong movements and like have a solid moment where you look at the audience, or or just have a moment with your partner, whatever, if you're social distancing.
Yeah, this is what I was really referring to when I was talking about that clarity and power behind the intention, because Tatiana's movement here is so powerful and intense, whereas Jordan's lifted leg is actually softer. So it's a really good contrast between the two to see how she's being more intense than he is at this point in time.
Yeah, and what makes it very powerful is the width of the feet. They're further apart than they normally would be. That makes it stronger. And also she very clearly has like a step and commits to it. Like it's not like, okay, I'm kind of stepping here, but I might be going this way. She knows what she's doing. She commits and she does it.
And then the other thing, and this is something that Tatiana is absolutely excellent at, is eye contact with the
Yeah.
audience. And so after she strikes the power pose, she makes eye contact before she continues with her hip movement.
Yeah, I love it. It's great.
And because her free arm is just straight and relaxed at her side, that is also helping with intensity. Because if it were like lifted with a delicate finger placement, that would soften it a little bit.
Yeah. Another piece of it is just the confidence. If you don't have confidence in what you're doing and in your dancing, you can tell.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell when people aren't sure of what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you watch spotlights for like lower levels, that's what you see very frequently. There's like a wishy-washiness, and kind of you can see discomfort. So I think maybe the next thing to talk about, because we have this big movement happening, is acceleration. That's a really big piece of intensity. And, you know, it's knowing how to create that acceleration and doing it cleanly. So once Tot kind of hits her shape, she stays there and just lets Jordan kind of move her around. And then she takes a really like decisive way to exit.
Yep. And I want to highlight, just technically connection wise, the acceleration is not happening on the 1.
Right.
It's not happening on the 2. It's happening after the release of the prep. So Tot is getting this wonderful resisted release all the way from her right elbow down to her left pointed foot. And as soon as she closes that chain, that's what gives the initial power for her first rotation. And then after that has resolved and she is already in process of rotating, then Jordan can add power and add speed with the arm. And actually the reason why he's like he's connecting with her bicep and like his wrist, and she has a bent elbow, creates a really strong connection point, like a really great lever that has fewer points in the chain for it to get muddied. So it makes it really strong and much easier to speed up.
And then she just really, I love that she doesn't try to do anything out of it. She just takes a moment to stop herself and just kind of hang out there and then goes into something else. And that creates like focus on her for the spotlighted situation, rather than having it on kind of both of them.
And there's a really great quality of like acknowledging something cool you just did that adds that like confidence to it. Like you didn't have to add something else. And knowing that you didn't have to add it and communicating that to the audience by just having some stillness adds a lot of intensity and confidence to it.
And one thing to point out is that because this is still towards the beginning of the song, we're getting intensity with acceleration, but nothing else at this point. So Tot, even though we have intensity with this acceleration, she herself, she's kind of crouching down and making herself smaller. That Tot is not amping up anything with like larger body movements. Like she's kind of crouching, and because they have the like the connection point that they do, it actually kind of pulls things in, right? It makes it smaller. So we're getting one element, but not anything else, right? So we are upping the intensity, but not too much yet.
Because they still need somewhere to go.
Yeah. I also want to add that it has nothing to do with what I've been seeing in Dallas. That when you are working with acceleration, you have to have good connection for that. Like you can't you cannot add to anything that's not there to begin with, right? So you
Mhm.
already have to have that established solid connection. And when you have such a light connection, you can't have that acceleration. Like
Right.
it, one of the ways that you can kind of tell that people don't have solid connection is because if you watch them dancing, it's all just kind of monotonous the whole time, right? There's not any acceleration, nothing. And a lot of fairly common patterns create acceleration. And so you should be seeing that at least here and there, right?
Mhm.
But a lot of times, if you don't have that connection, you won't see it. And it just looks very,
Monotone. It's like someone
very
speaking to
boring.
you in a monotone voice. I feel like you
Yeah.
made that prosodic. I'm sorry.
Yep.
I'm too hyper.
Yep. But I just wanted to mention that because acceleration is a really important part of dancing in general, but also because we were talking about it with intensity specifically, like you have to have good connection for that.
Yeah.
And I would say just in general for upping intensity, you have to have good connection for that, you know?
Mhm. Agreed. Because if you're going to do something really clearly with power, you need to be able to communicate that to your partner, regardless of which role you're in.
Yeah. Yep. I love that after that really strong movement, we're going back to just kind of something
It's just a
casual.
side pass.
Yeah.
It's just a side pass with a roll in and a roll out.
Yep. Very boring, but very effective in having that change of um, really high intensity to, kind of casual, low intensity. You need to have
Mhm.
that contrast.
Yep. And if you want to think kind of tactically about it, it might also be helping reset Tatiana's inner ear to get her
Yeah.
a basic
Yep.
rotation in one direction and immediately in the other direction.
Mhm.
Because making sure to even out your inner ear fluid is like very helpful when
Yeah.
that's why like for those who don't know, like an easy way to balance yourself out is not just to spin the other way, but to just bounce into your knees a little bit to
Yeah.
help even out your inner ear. We don't call this nerdy West Coast swing for
So immediately following the kind of casual pattern, we get something that is accelerated again.
yep.
And Tot adds more to it this time. So the first time, right, I was saying that she was kind of bringing things in
Mm-hmm.
to go through that rotation. This time she's really opening up and like spreading out. So we have the initially the legs swinging out and around. So you're extending that. And then she gets into a really wide stance and she has some hairography,
Some
which
excellent hairography.
it is. It's fantastic. I love her hair in this. It looks so cute.
Me too.
I love the color of it. Um, anyways, what I was going to say is that hairography is a really great way for follows to kind of up the intensity without having to do too much else
Mm-hmm.
because it adds some dramatic flair to the
Mm-hmm.
movement. Um, but I was also going to say, so she adds the hairography, but then she also swings the arm out and around, right? So we just have kind of everything moving outward rather than having things kind of coming inward like the first time.
Yep. And then I want to add some subtle things that make movements just so much more powerful. So not only is she making herself physically wider towards us in the frame with one leg going one way, one arm going the other way, but right here, as she extends her right foot towards where it's going to land on the ground, she's arcing her body in a really lovely way to
Yeah.
prep. So that way, when she gets into this position, like really hinged at the hips. The difference between this shape and this shape is so drastic that it's dramatic, and it makes this finished shape that much more intense. So this is where you can add that intensity. Like there would be a way to go into this shape softly, and you would just have less prep and less speed to go into it softly. But because of that shape beforehand, it makes it so much more powerful.
I also want to add that Jordan is moving like around her.
Let's talk technique. So basically, where the follow's left foot lands, right here on, is that 5? Once her left foot lands here, that is her vertical axis around which she is going to be spinning. And you can see where I left my cursor, like right around her face and neck area. Like her axis is staying pretty darn centered over that one point. And so Jordan is the one who is in charge of, you can see his foot goes from here to all the way over here. Like, damn, sir. And then after that, it is still his job to go around her. So she did not travel anywhere.
Yeah. The most she traveled was because she was rotating. So she was traveling foot to foot because of the rotation. But it was pretty much in one spot. If you add a lot of traveling to that, it becomes very awkward very fast.
Yep. Like a lot of leaders will maybe get this initial rotation down, but then at this point, they'll like shove the follow in that direction. And no, I will find you.
Yeah, Jordan is like taking up quite a bit of floor in like one or two movements around her. And Jordan is pretty short, so
it kind of is. I still remember what like the first time they're so tiny. The first time I saw them in person, I think it was like Chico Dance Sensation years and years ago. And as a 5'11" plus size individual, I was like, oh my God, you're adorable. So tiny. So then the other thing that I love, like we were talking about earlier, is like after this really intense thing, Tot is in no rush to get out of it. It's like sensual the way she comes out of it, and there's like so much power and confidence behind it. It's amazing. And then next thing I want to add, like so far as individuals, Tot's intensity has come from playing within the structure that Jordan is giving her. Jordan's intensity so far is as puppet master. He hasn't done much beyond just having excellent control of his body movements in the context of the patterns he's leading to have that intensity. He's been creating a space within which Tot can be providing the oomph. And he's trusting her. So something that I see is leaders try to do everything themselves, and it just ends up the follow. Even sometimes it looks like the follow doesn't even get to dance up and down a slot because it looks like the leader is. And so understanding that as a leader, yes, you can create moments for yourself. But it's more about as a partnership, what moments can you create for the follow to fill? And I often say that is the main reason why follows love following me the most. It's like, yes, my connection's great, but musically, I know the moments that they want to hit, and in general, how they want to hit them. All I have to do is to create the space for that to happen, and they fucking love me. That's all. And I wish more leaders understood the magic of that combination.
Yeah. Great. Aaron said, how do you encourage that as a lead for them to take their space and let them have the fun.
Ooh, that is a doozy of a question. We should do a whole episode on it.
We could, yeah.
Yeah. So part of it is releasing the agenda, because there's the creating the space itself, but
Mhm.
then not trying to force the follow to fill that time and space in the way you wanted them to.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a really simple example of this is the dance monkey dance side pass. So a normal side pass gives plenty of opportunity for a follow to play.
Yeah.
You do not have to baby a follow into like a slowed down neutral connection side pass to give them opportunity to play.
Mhm.
When you do that, you're actually taking their agency away from them, and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So if you have strong connection and strong basics, a follow will play within that context if they have the skills to do so.
Yeah.
When you want to create moments, however, it's again like, do you know this pattern like the back of your hand? And can you lead it and then let go of the expectation of how the follow is going to finish it? So if, for example, this last pattern that we were just looking at, Jordan had the agenda that Tot was going to do a really quick bend and snap. Cue legally blonde gif. I will probably find one when I'm editing this. He might he might have like rushed her out of that position, and that's not, you don't have control over how a follow is going to finish a movement. That's why tether now we're getting into martial arts. I'm super nerdy tonight. That's why tethered weapons that are like rope based, chain based are require the most skill, because you're basically you're sending an object out away from you, and you need to understand how the tether is going to affect that object.
Mhm.
So West Coast swing connection is similar. However, the object you're tethering has free will.
Right. A little different.
It's a little different. So if you get the physics part right, then magic happens.
Yeah.
So that is a too long didn't read, but please remind us to put that on the list for a future episode, because I want to do that episode.
I'm just gonna put it in our notes for
Cool.
tonight, real fast.
Excellent. And then we do a pretty simple stylized kind of push pass where it's like a fake out pass. That's what we'll call it. I don't know if they have an official name, which is still like a basic, but they're dancing it with that varied timing. So there is like an acceleration and then a resolution. Like whereas before we had like a basic roll into shadow position, roll out.
Yeah.
We're slowly escalating. So as you're escalating your A game, you should be escalating your B game along with it, but
Yeah.
not necessarily as fast. So you want to like make sure that there's going to be lots of contrast by the end, but you don't
Mhm.
want to leave your B game down on the ground either.
Yeah.
um, and then I love Tot's choice with this anchor.
I agree.
Oh, great.
This is like the best technique that I've seen from her in a while.
I know. So good. And I don't know, just her and Jordan doing demos of just basic technique. It's so rare to see, and it's
Yeah.
so
So
good.
fresh.
I love it so much. And then I think I also love this because this is like my favorite anchor to do personally as a follow, which is left foot in front and
Yeah.
drawing through. It's so good.
So it's nice.
All right, I want to highlight because on in our Patreon classes for this month, we are talking about a shorter leader, taller follow situation from one of our more critical things. And one of the things that happen is the leader is pulling the follow down towards the ground, not just forward.
Yeah.
And I want to highlight that, like, it comes down as she's coming towards her hand.
Yeah.
So the handhold is not accelerating beyond her ability to stay connected to it, which is the key difference. Like, he's waiting for her to catch up to the hand. And then once she has, he's able to travel a little bit more.
Right. And they're staying in that like tension
Yeah.
throughout it.
Yeah, like this is a masterclass on this is how you do it. But most just do, here, have some floor in your face. Ah!
Which is always fun.
So fun. It's a grand old time.
You gotta learn how to style that.
Yeah. I call it the drinking bird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually the first time that we've seen Jordan in his own body do something that's kind of independent of what he's leading. So yes, he's essentially just drawing her forward into kind of a scrolling push break kind of a thing that's going on. Basically a push break without the push part.
The break.
And him like hunching over and looking up at her is very purposeful, and it has a very clear beginning and end. There's no muddiness. You can tell it was a proactive choice on his part to enter that shape.
Yeah.
As
not
opposed to
awkwardly hunching
just
forward.
like, this is how I exist. Was the hump on that side or that side?
Yeah. Very different. Very different.
Yeah.
Especially because there's a clear beginning and end to it.
Yeah. And then I also want to highlight not only this double handhold that Tot went for, but the way she draws her left hand up her arm, across her clavicle, and then down the side of her ribs. So good.
Yeah, that's generally the way that I end up getting out of those like double hand type things. Generally, I get into them mostly unintentionally.
Yeah. And what's interesting, here's another contrast, like the reason it's so intense is because it's basically full contact, her whole hand and fingers against her own body. And that's much more intense than if it were like there were some space between or more styled fingertips. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Why are you laughing?
Sorry about that later.
Oh, geez. But there's like a way to do that.
It's a Britney story.
Oh, geez. But there's a way to do that same movement in a more soft fashion as opposed to intense.
I also really like that we're just kind of extending it and using some of the floor. I think it's a great way to keep things a little bit more chill, but still keep the dance moving, keep it flowing.
It's a great way to continue escalating that B track.
Yeah.
Without like going all crazy with it.
Yeah. Because the like how much floor they're taking up, that adds quite a bit of intensity to it.
I love this transition into a closed position right here.
Me too. It's really nice.
And it's giving Tot an opportunity to do like strut walks, which is just a really wonderfully intense thing to do as a follow if you have the opportunity to do it and it's musically relevant.
Yeah. So she's actually just like straight up following this. And I know that it maybe doesn't look like that, but because of the handhold that they get into, right? So we have the hand that's going up above, and then they transition into like a palm to palm. And so that's allowing him to control that side of her body forward and back.
Yep.
And so that's why we're getting Tot's kind of like rotation, right? Because he is pushing towards her with that, or kind of stopping, I should say.
It's a center counterpoint. So
Right.
he's compressing into a point in space that she is then matching. So the handhold isn't coming towards or away from either of them. It's only changing vertically. Yeah, it's really important that he's not pushing it into her space because that would compromise her shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like because she gets to that like one side a little bit more forward than the other, because there's some compression going towards that right side of her body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like he's pushing it into her space, but it's more like he's kind of stopping that side and bringing the other side forward.
Yep, right here.
And that's what's creating that rotation. It's not so much that Tot's just like, I'm going to style it this way. I mean, she could, but that's not what's happening here.
Right. She's maybe adding a little extra rotation through the hips than what she's got in the shoulders, but that's her choice. But yeah, he is leading this very much.
I just wanted to mention that because I don't think we've talked about the palm to palm handhold too much.
Yeah, no, I haven't. But it's a great tool to have that center counterpoint compression in a closed position.
Yeah.
It's much easier than your standard handhold.
And I would also say that adding some extra like shaping to this pretty basic pattern here, it's adding some more complexity, more intensity to the dance, even though they're still kind of in their like, we're chilling out here.
Right. Especially since it's so controlled and the integrity of the timing, like it's pulsy, like so juicy. Anyways. All right. Now, we did a whole episode on telemarks way back in the early days. But this telemark in particular is so good. Like you can even see, like he's dancing on the freaking seam of the floor. So if you look at this seam in the floorboard, Jordan is living on that seam and he's leading Tot to be the one who's switching which side of it she's on. That's a telemark.
That's such a good visual.
So good. So this is an excellent, and I know they tend to include telemarks in their swing team choreographies really frequently. And this is an excellent example, especially with that seam in the floor, to just pay attention to the basic technique of whose job it is to pass who and in what way. So highly recommend studying it. If we went over it right now, we'd be here for another 2 hours. So
probably
move on.
So go watch the hour we already did on it.
yeah, I will link it.
You're curious.
And then just a really simple extra spins and then a barrel roll at the end to just add some intensity. So they did, I would say, a telemark in the grand scheme of this dance. A telemark is kind of like the median intensity, and then adding those spins on the end just add a little bit. So it's still like the B track that I was talking about.
And it's kind of like mid intensity because there's quite a bit of traveling happening with it, and rotation as well, right? So we have quite a bit of extra movement, even though that movement isn't particularly like strong or fast.
And then another sign, just while we're here, of a great telemark, I'm just going to hold forward like I have been. And I want you to notice the breath moment where Jordan has his hiya right there. And that breath moment as he comes across to the other side and just lives there for a second, that change in timing is like really important to make a telemark really like hit home and also feel good connection wise.
And then they kind of like punctuate the end of this with something that's a little bit more intense because they add that barrel roll. Do you want to talk about like acceleration with that barrel roll lead?
Do I? Will we be here another 2 hours? So the first thing I want to note it to highlight is that Jordan's hand is at her shoulder level. He is dropping his elbow, leaving the hand up. He is not swinging it down in a like reverse rainbow. This is not a windmill turn. So it has been going over her head. And for it to successfully become a barrel roll, it has to come down a little bit. But he's only bringing it down just enough for him to get prepped for it. And then you can see, based on where his elbow is, his forearm is over top of his head. So he is putting the handhold back behind him as far as possible to be comfortable for Tot. And then the other thing, like we were talking about with that, it's connected with her elbow, the turn right at the beginning.
Yeah.
This is one of those things where he can prep her initial rotation at kind of standard speeds or slightly accelerated, but it isn't until she is turning that he can use the pulse moment to add some extra power. So he's not trying to create the power for all 10, 15 spins in the initial prep.
Yeah.
That's how you make a follow feel like they're being yeeted off the face of the earth.
Not the most enjoyable feeling.
No, it's great. It's wonderful. So if there is some acceleration in the original prep, it's just enough to get the whole shebang going, and then it's his job to keep it going.
Yeah.
And then I love how they just have this moment of chill at the end, acknowledging what they just did.
And then I love the little extra hairography that she adds to it. Nice. So we're kind of going medium again because we kind of ended that last spin sequence on like medium intensity. So we're kind of keeping with that here because we're getting a more complex pattern, a little bit more movement from Jordan.
And even more spins.
Yeah, it's probably about the right time for them to be pretty mid-level energy-wise, because this is kind of
the halfway point of the song.
Yeah, the halfway point of the song.
And then this is a really good example of the question that you were asking earlier, Erin. So Jordan leads this turn sequence, and then he's basically not releasing the connection, but chilling it out enough that Tot has some options. And there are so many things she could do from here. So many. But her choice is to use her knees that function, and I am highly jealous. Anyways. And then I want to highlight how when she comes out of this, they move into compression first to re-engage instead of just automatically scrolling away. And that to me is a really sign of like high level connection. Because it's easier to transition into tension from compression than it is from neutral.
And they're already just kind of naturally leaning into each other a little bit before they get into that compression. And because the handhold is now like going down and up rather than the normal, so it kind of changes the connection. So there is connection there, but it's not enough to engage to scroll. So they instead use torso to torso type compression. And I say torso to torso, I mean Tot has her hand on his kind of mid chest area, and she's compressing in with her torso.
And then I also want to highlight that Jordan is just doing some really simple, subtle chugs. while
Yeah.
she's doing that. And that brings me to another point. Like I was talking about how as a leader, you are trying to create time and space for the follows to fill.
Mhm.
And you want to choose your moments as a leader to quote unquote steal a spotlight, as it were. You don't want to be the star of the show the whole time. Can that, what is the point of having a follow on your arm?
Right.
And so one of the signs of an excellent leader is one who can add in these really subtle elements that just bring up the quality. And I would say this is something that obviously Jordan is excellent with, but also Kyle excels at, because he is capable of just adding the just the cherry on top throughout all of his basics, whatever he's doing. So he's creating this beautiful structure for the follow, but in the whole time, there's just this extra level of quality and complexity to his base movement that is so musical that makes it so impactful.
We have a really nice moment that ups the intensity and then kind of chills it out.
Mm-hmm.
So
are you noticing a pattern, people?
Yeah, right. So we're up in the intensity with that like neck roll type thing. And then we have Jordan kind of bring her around through it. And then once we get here, Top just kind of plants and then she takes her time to do her thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there's a thing I need to highlight because like this hand right here, Tot is once again a stable point in space, and Jordan is accommodating it. He is not pushing her over to her right side. He is coming to her left side. Just really important detail.
Yeah, it is. And I really like the choice that she makes. She doesn't like do anything that like changes anything about what they're doing. She just kind of adds some like sass to it, right? She adds some like hip movement.
Mm-hmm.
And then she clearly comes back to Jordan. It's like, okay, I'm good now.
Mm-hmm.
You can lead me again. So I think we're getting towards this really long like ride thing that happens.
Yep.
I think that's about where we're at.
Oh, is this the splits? Yeah. So we have this is the split combo first. So first of all, like, yes, there have been lots of spinning, but we haven't really had continuous neck rolls yet.
Yeah.
So this is another example of just like added complexity to the elements they were already including.
Mm-hmm.
And then a breath.
And that added complexity can also create just more intensity just in the fact that there's more going on.
Right. And then they have a breath moment coming out of it, which is, I believe, just hitting something in the music and breathing into it. And then there's a really strong connection in the handhold here. And Jordan can tell just by nature of her taking her center further back than her foot and also squatting down a little bit that he is about to need to provide some weight support for her. So this is an example of her asking for weight support. She's not taking it.
Yeah.
She's not dropping into it. She is very much communicating it. And he's getting ready.
Gradually.
Yeah.
And she's gradually doing that by like slowly committing the weight to the right side as she's coming out of that turn.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we have that connection catch. And then as she moves away from him, that's where we're getting the request for more connection, added weight.
Yeah. And you can really tell just how much attention Jordan is paying to her.
Mm-hmm.
Like he has his left foot out and ready to not only counterbalance the weight, but to then step over there, which is what he ends up doing. He ends up ghosting it back towards him just a little bit based on what she's doing, so he can be in more of a plie. And then right here, after she finishes traveling through this split, you can see his right foot does a little hop, like right there. And then as soon as they have both kind of collected themselves and the momentum has resolved, there's just a moment of like, okay, what next?
Right.
They're not rushing. And then she's initiating this next thing by bringing her leg back. And he's like, okay, I know what's going on. I'll help now. And that's when he starts assisting.
Yeah.
So he did not initiate that rotation right here. She did. And then he followed through and assisted.
Yeah.
I love, is Tot a superhero? She does like lots of superhero poses.
She does.
Now I want her to cosplay as, is it Yelena, Black Widow's sister? I need it.
Interesting.
I need it in my life. All right, I think this is the ride to end all rides. So we're about like, I'd say 2/3 of the way through the song. So this is that like climax denouement part of story structure of a whole song. So this is like maximum intensity. We have arrived. This is what we have been escalating to.
Yeah.
It's time to storm the castle.
And it's interesting because like the movements that they're doing initially don't have that much power to them, but because it's continuous, because they're both kind of expanding away from them, that's where we're getting the intensity from initially. And then I know at the very end of this ride, they go into some really fast rotations, but initially it's not that. The intensity is from the shaping as well, because we have some really unique shaping going on. And so, like I said earlier, that added complexity just increases intensity on its own.
Yep. And then Jordan is basically playing a game of what counterbalance does she need now? And then providing it. And then whenever something seems to resolve, he'll maybe change it up a little bit. So like after this ride right here, he just loops her hand over his head to change it into more of a closed position connection, which can change the shape even further.
Yeah, and this is where we get that added momentum and acceleration.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight where Jordan's right foot is when we go into this. So right here, their heels are essentially right next to each other, and then their feet. So they are literally sharing a center as much as two objects can occupy the same point in space. They are trying to occupy the same point in space. That's how shared their center is. All together now. I'm going to hold forward. And so this is the kind of thing where it's their skill with connection that allowed that to be created, because you cannot, I mean, you can't obviously choreograph something like this and practice it and create the exact same thing over and over and over again. But this is leadable, followable. And it's managing the physics of the connection and noticing the nuances of when a certain piece of momentum is resolving itself.
Right.
And when there's opportunity to change something because something is being resolved.
And even if this was something that was like a choreographed piece, you still have to lead and follow. Like you can't just independently move, even if you know what's going on, which is something which it's like routine category stuff, but you know, a lot of people can really show that connection well, even if it is like something that they've choreographed. But so it should be there either way.
Yeah. So I want to highlight one of those moments of transition where something is resolving. So through this rotation, Tot is basically progressing towards a very particular shape. And the finished shape is this one right here, where her right leg and right arm are both extended away and slightly behind her. Once she reaches and finishes that shape, it then becomes, if she were to just want to stay in that shape and ride there, Jordan has a much harder job than if she's moving. He would have to like book it like the devil, and she would like having this one point of connection to stay in this shape and just ride with it. That's so hard. So the fact that she has hit max position in this shape means it's now an opportunity for something to change because something has resolved. And so
Yeah.
the thing that starts changing first, and I would say this is up to Tatiana because she's the one balancing on her foot. So it's up to her to make a change and then Jordan to notice and then follow
Yeah.
along with it. And the thing that
Generally.
she changes is she starts rotating her pelvis ever so slightly and sitting back. Well, it's not, no, her right leg starts coming back forward again. So you can see her thigh is now in front of her, whereas before it was behind.
Yeah.
So her hips are rotating faster than her leg is through space, essentially.
Yeah,
And
so she is releasing that leg and letting it stay where it's at in space and letting the rest of her body catch up to it. So we're getting this rotation around out to the side with the leg.
Yep. So that's the thing. This shape has finished, it's resolved, and the momentum needs to go somewhere. And so that's the change. And that means her arm is now in his hand differently than it was. And it's conducive to this, where he starts actually scooping it under.
Mm-hmm.
And so he did not have the idea to lead that. He's noticing that her position has changed and there is now an opportunity for that. And it actually becomes necessary in the connection to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because as she transitions this, she then has a lot of weight going down into the floor.
Yep. And there's this moment here where the arm has to accelerate to keep her over her center. So we could do that kind of analysis for every transition in this ride, but we'd be here for 5 million years. So I guess that the points are, as a leader, you're paying attention to when energy resolves, and then it needs to change in order to maintain a ride. And basically the follow will tell you how it needs to change, and you just follow through with it.
Yeah, I will add on to that. If it's a higher level, more skilled follow, that's what should happen, is for you as a lead to let your follow dictate where you're resolving things and moving next. But if you get into a ride situation with newer follows, they might not fully understand it. So
right, there will just become a point where it seems to suddenly you were on easy mode and now it's like on extra hard mode and you don't know why. It's just because the movement of the initial ride has resolved and the follow doesn't know how to change their shape to maintain momentum based on the shape they were just in. So all that means to you as a leader, don't try to force more ride and don't try to force them to change their shape. Just exit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my major problem when it comes to like follows doing one-footed turns, is that a lot of them will keep going past the point where it's like momentum based and easy.
Yeah.
Instead of just stopping it and moving on.
Then last thing I want to mention is this acceleration here at the very end. So if I just hold forward, basically what's creating that is Tot is really squatting down and back.
Yeah. Just kind of dropping.
Yeah.
Into his arm.
Yeah. And it's kind of like how if you're riding on a swing set, you're slowing down at the highest points and then you're speeding through the bottom. That's the kind of physics that you're getting in this. And so as long as Jordan isn't interrupting the physics of what she's doing, it's going to accelerate anyways.
Yeah.
And if he were to just like push his hand away from himself and be like, I want you to squat, that doesn't work, because as a leader, you need to be counterbalancing that.
Yeah. Can you actually go back just for a second and
Yeah.
show what Jordan's foot is doing? So he gets to a point where he's just kind of like chugging around his own foot.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say that because he's not initially doing that. It's once they're getting into kind of a more solid continuous rotation that
Hmm.
he's then just kind of hanging off of her and using a foot to like paddle around.
Yeah, because in the beginning he's doing this sidestep, cross in front, sidestep, cross in front, kind of staying towards a almost like a follows third foot position. And then the more momentum they get, that's when they start sharing that center. And his right foot is basically with her foot. And he's actually ending up pivoting on his heel in order to stay back weighted enough uh, to compensate for her.
Yep.
And I love at the end, she's like, she just did like something so gymnastic and amazing. And then she's all like, look, pretty foot. And it's just so pretty. I'm like, I would want a drink of water after all that. And then they do one of their signature hayas, which I want to point out is basically Jordan getting into what looks like a pretzel position and then doing nothing.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's all taut in her hair.
Yep.
His hands are basically doing nothing. He is not whiplashing her back and forth.
No, she's the one doing
Yeah.
all of it.
She's whipping her own hair back and forth. And then we get to the more or less, we're kind of at the end here. This is where the comedy starts kicking in.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna hold forward because this ending is hilarious.
I like how we get back into like chill mode first.
I know, yeah, because like you need to resolve the story. The war is
Mhm.
over. We stormed the castle, so they go to back to something. They're back to their B story, which still
Mhm.
has that like they leveled. So they started here. Their A story ended up all the way up here. Their B story ended up here, and this is where they come back to after they do this instead of all the way down here.
Mhm.
And then why not make this? I applaud Jordan for his comedic prowess right there. This is just so good.
She's like, "Oh, we're really moving back. Okay,
It's like, oh, okay,
I guess I need the floor."
sweet. I still have dreams of them doing a Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton exhibition because I just think
Entertaining.
I need it to happen. Somebody tell them that I have this idea because I could do a PowerPoint about my vision for this exhibition because I got ideas.
Anyways,
Leave your guesses for because I very particular. I know which one is Buster and which one is Charlie. I know. Leave your guesses in the comments below for those of you watching YouTube. Let's see if we're on the same wavelength. And I will correct you if you're wrong. Anyways, I know we have a question from our last video that we need to cover, but are there any questions for those of you here with us live on anything we talked about today? All right. I do not know how to pronounce this lovely person's name, but Morella. One, what can I do to get better faster, like from one event to another, to actually be making progress? What's the secret here? I see people out of newcomers in a month and out of novice in 8 months. I finally made out of newcomers in one whole year, and I've been going to most of the events around here. And then two, what is best to invest in? More events or more private lessons? And if you think going to more events speeds up the advancement, I chose more privates, but I see many people advancing faster by going to more events. Thank you. So thanks for those amazing questions.
Mhm.
You want to go first?
I'll let you go first.
All right. So the what's the secret here is kind of a loaded question because I think the thing that is really helpful to pay attention to when you're first entering the competitive scene in West Coast Swing is you are only in direct control of one thing, your individual dancing. And there are so many other factors that contribute to whether or not you succeed competitively. Who
Yeah.
you draw, the music that's played, who's judging. And while one might hope that the judging would be a consistent variable, in West Coast Swing, unfortunately, it is not. So one person may do really well in one region of the country or on the planet, because West Coast Swing is everywhere at this point.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Yeah.
But do very poorly in a different region. And that's just how this dance goes at this point in time. If you have not watched our interview with Robert Royston that we did recently, highly recommend that, along with our episode with Miles Monroe on judging. If you are ever struggling with confidence issues or self-worth issues because of how well or not well you're doing competitively, please remember that you have direct control over so little of what goes into competitive success. So is that enough to get you started? I don't want to keep blabbing over anything you want to say.
Yeah, I do want to add that, like, even when you get to higher levels, like, we feel that same frustration, of, some people move through the ranks so fast and some don't. And a lot of it, like Cassie was saying, there's so many other variables, but it also has to do with how many different events each person is going to.
Mhm.
It's like, if you're an okay dancer, like okay enough to final, but like that's it, and you go to a bunch of events, you're going to, add up those points, and eventually you'll be out. And maybe you place here or there, but it's not, it's a lot about how many events you're going to.
Yeah.
Um,
And how many of the teachers on the judging staff know you?
yeah.
So I would recommend in the early days. Well, actually, no, it depends. So instead of focusing on your competitive success, I would focus instead on your fulfillment as a dancer. I would recommend, because I did this in the wrong order myself, is finding what brings you joy in this community is 1,000 times more important than the success. The success can come later. If you know how to enjoy yourself and feel fulfilled as a dancer, that's the skill that is most important, especially when you are a competitor, because it can be really hard to not get the validation that you deserve. So that aside, if you are going to take private lessons, I would say take them from as many people as possible. So
Mhm.
I often recommend having like one primary dance doctor is my like. So you have like one to like thread everything together for you. And that is someone who speaks your language, so to speak, and is really easy to communicate to and to understand and to have higher level nuanced conversations about how this dance functions, what the technique is, and how to translate that into personal choices for yourself. That should be your primary private lesson instructor. And then
Yeah.
go out and learn from as many different people as possible, and then bring it back to your primary dance doctor and have high level discussions about it. And not only will that enrich your skill set, but it will help you become familiar to a lot of the judges in the scene, which can help you. That one of the inherent biases, unfortunately, in West Coast Swing is that familiarity piece, and it's hard to erase that as a bias from a judge's mind. Like, they should have the skill to do that, but unfortunately, not all of them do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, going to lots of events, if that will fulfill you, go for it. If having a lot of private lessons will fulfill you, go for it. I would focus on
Yeah.
the fulfillment over competitive success first. Other than that, we would need to see a video of your dancing in order to give you more concrete, like how to improve your dancing
Mhm.
feedback. So by watching our shows, you're already doing amazing work. You're training your eye, which so many dancers don't bother to do, and that will help you go farther faster. But if you want us to give you feedback, we do that. So
Yeah.
just hit us up.
I also want to add on to the event versus private question, because I think that it just really depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to move up the ranks, it's going to be better for you to go to more events, because there's more opportunities for you to learn there, because they have so many different like group classes that are, you know, included with the event. And when you're a newer dancer, I think that those are things that you should really use. They're there for a reason. And I think that it's only once you get to really high levels that those classes don't add as much value as they could. Not to say that they aren't great, they are, but you know, just at lower levels, like you can just get so many different pieces of information from going to like group classes and whatnot. And then like the instructors for those classes are going to notice you because you're in those classes. Then if you know you see the same people over and over, they'll catch your eye. So it really just depends. I think that if you want to improve your own dancing, improve your enjoyment of your social dancing, improve your partner's experience dancing with you, I think that private lessons are the way to go. But if your focus is moving up the ranks, I would go with events. But I mean, there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah.
Ideally, you could, you know, do events and do a private here or there with the instructors that are there because they travel. And so you're not going to be able to work with them particularly frequently unless you are going to all the events that they're at. So I just think it depends on what your goal is. I think personally, everyone's goal should be more just improving their own enjoyment, their own skill, because, you know, like really we're here for the social dance, right? Like that's what we go and do week to week. That's why we're all here. And so I think that it's better to invest in that. And generally along the way, you will then do better competitively because you're learning more skills to help you manage not only your own dancing, but your partner as well. And so I just think that really private lessons are probably the best option. But if you are concerned about moving up the ranks, then events.
Yeah. And then as a side note, if it's within your capacity, I always recommend that as early as you can, start learning the other role.
Yeah.
Because A, it's just fun, and B, it just accelerates your understanding of this dance so much.
Yeah. And I always recommend, like, because I know Cassie was saying that you should try and take privates from a bunch of different people. And I agree with that. But I also think that once you are established in kind of what you would like your dancing to look like, and you find a pro that is similar in terms of like body and like what you like to see in dancing, I would work with them more exclusively. Not to say that going to other instructors wouldn't be beneficial, but it helps you kind of hone in on what you want to improve on, and what you want to have as your end goal. So I just think that it just really depends. Like if you are just wanting to improve yourself, find somebody that you can work with on a constant basis, that is similar in what you would like to look like, or that is somewhat similar body type, something like that. So
yeah, that cannot emphasize that enough, especially if you're not a tiny Tatiana.
Yeah.
Like finding someone who understands how your body has to move through space in this dance can be so powerful.
Yeah. And that doesn't always have to be a champion. It doesn't. Like, I mean, yes, the champions are fantastic. Most of them are great instructors. But they might not necessarily be able to help you specifically, like with your body type, with the style that you want to do. They might give you feedback that, oh, you should try something this way when you don't really like that style, that type of thing. So, it's just anyone, I would say, that you feel that you can learn from and that can help you progress in your skill and your knowledge. I say work with them. Doesn't have to be a champion, doesn't have to be an all-star, just somebody that you feel you can work with and that works with what you want for your dancing.
So. Awesome. Well, thank you again for those amazing questions. We're always happy to answer more, and just let us know if you want us to analyze one of your dances one of these days. We can do that either in a public forum like this. Like if you want free feedback, we could do an episode on your video. If you want private feedback from both of us, we're both available for Zoom analysis lessons, either separately or together. And we can also do it inside of our Patreon. So you would just need to be a Patreon member and we would cover your video 1 month. So lots of different ways to work with us. And like I said before, we are closer to 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours. Please subscribe, click that notification bell, join us on Patreon, share us with your friends.
Yes.
Join the nerdy West Coast Swing Legion.
All right. So I think that our next episode, we're covering Glenn and Susan.
Oh, I'm so excited. I love that dance.
A couple weeks. Yes. So that one will be fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for joining us.
We'll see you next time.
Next time. I don't know why, but when we picked this video and like watching it again now, I'm like, I know this is a cover. Like clearly this is a cover, but what is it? I don't know why. It took my brain until just a few moments to go to be like, oh my God, it was sexy back. Oh my God. Because like,
let me see if you can see what Coco is doing.
Oh, hi there. Goodness, that's cute.
She's resting her chin on the desk in the most uncomfortable way possible. When do
you want that on the record? Because I can edit that out later.
Doesn't really matter.
Okay, cool. I don't know. I was having such a low energy day, and I don't know what it is about this topic. Or maybe my partner replaced our dinner quesadillas with something.
Obviously that one.
yeah. There's just something in the cheese. I don't know.
The cheese. It took me an extra second to process because I was typing.
You're like, what on earth is Cassie saying now? Please, someone save me from her.
I mean, I've committed to this, so here we are.
I appreciate it. Thank you. It's like nothing more intoxicating than a happy Jordan.
That was really enjoyable to watch.
Love it so much. Still, one of my favorite memories was the one of the last Chico dance sensations, the imitational Jack and Jill. And Jordan, the name that Jordan drew out of the hat that he had to imitate is Chuck Brown, which is even funnier because it's Chuck's event. And oh man, like Jordan went method, and it was mwah. It was beautiful. Hey, said something smart. So excited. Okay. Is Coco wanting another cameo appearance?
She's here. She's smelling something. I don't know. Hi, girl. She's a licker, and she always ends up licking makeup. She never likes it, but she keeps doing it.
Sounds delicious.